Have you ever felt that unsettling moment when someone's smile doesn't quite reach their eyes? When their words sound supportive, but something deep in your gut whispers that you're being set up? That's not paranoia. That's your survival instincts. Recognizing a predator in sheep's clothing. Because the truth is, manipulators aren't the obvious villains from movies. They don't wear black hats or cackle menacingly. They're the colleague who always seems to know exactly what to say. The friend who remembers every weakness you've shared. The partner who makes you question your own memory of events. Modern manipulation has evolved into something far more sophisticated and dangerous than anything our ancestors faced. These aren't crude bullies or obvious con artists. Today's manipulators are psychological architects, carefully constructing elaborate games where you don't even realize you're a player until you've already lost everything that matters. They study human psychology like a science, exploit emotional vulnerabilities like a surgeon, and operate with the patience of a spider waiting in its web. But here's what they don't want you to know. 500 years ago, a brilliant and ruthless Italian philosopher named Niccolo Machiavelli decoded their entire playbook. He didn't just understand manipulation, he mastered the art of reversing it. And his tactics weren't born from theory or wishful thinking. They were forged in the brutal political landscape of Renaissance Italy, where a single miscalculation could mean exile, imprisonment, or death. Machiavelli's strategies weren't just about survival. They were about turning the tables so completely that your enemies would destroy themselves while you remained untouched. The most dangerous mistake you can make when dealing with manipulators is believing that good intentions and moral superiority will protect you. That if you just speak the truth loudly enough, people will see through the lies. That if you maintain your integrity, justice will somehow prevail. Machiavelli would have laughed at such naive optimism. He understood a brutal truth that most people refuse to accept. In this world, perception is reality, and manipulators are masters of perception. Think about it. How many times have you watched someone lie with absolute confidence while the person telling the truth stumbled over their words? How often have you seen the manipulator play victim so convincingly that everyone rushed to their defense while the real victim was painted as the aggressor? This isn't coincidence. It's strategy. And until you understand that you're fighting a war of perception, not truth, you'll keep losing battles you should have won. The first weapon in Machiavelli's arsenal is what he called strategic ignorance. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive tactic of all, because every fiber of your being will want to prove that you're smarter than the person trying to manipulate you. But that impulse is exactly what they're counting on. The moment you reveal that you've seen through their game, you lose the greatest advantage you could ever have, the element of surprise. Picture this scenario. Someone approaches you with a sob story designed to make you feel guilty or responsible for their problems. Your natural instinct might be to either help them or call them out on their manipulation. But Machiavelli would suggest a third option. Pretend to be fooled while secretly documenting every lie, every inconsistency, every reveal of their true character. Let them think they're winning while you're actually gathering intelligence. This isn't about being cruel or enjoying their deception. It's about recognizing that manipulators are like magicians. Their power comes from misdirection and your inability to see what's really happening. But the moment you start playing dumb strategically, you become the one controlling the performance. You see the tricks, you understand the timing, and most importantly, you watch them reveal weaknesses they never intended to show. The genius of strategic ignorance is that it makes manipulators overconfident. They start taking bigger risks, telling bigger lies, making bolder moves because they believe you're too naive to catch on. And with each escalation, they give you more ammunition to use against them when the moment is right. They literally hand you the rope they'll eventually hang themselves with. But timing is everything. The amateur move is to confront them the moment you see through their facade. The Machiavellian move is to wait until you have overwhelming evidence, perfect timing, and the moral high ground so solid that their inevitable counterattack will only make them look more guilty. You don't strike when you're angry. You strike when you're certain. The second pillar of Machiavelli's strategy involves controlling the narrative before your enemies even know there's a story to tell. Manipulators thrive in chaos because confusion is their natural habitat. When people don't know what to believe, they default to believing whoever sounds most confident, most composed, most in control. That's why your first priority isn't defending yourself from attacks. It's positioning yourself as the unshakable source of clarity in a world full of noise. Consider how manipulators typically operate. They spread rumors, create drama, and then position themselves as the calm voice of reason, trying to help everyone work through the chaos they secretly created. It's brilliant in its simplicity. They benefit from the problem and the solution, the disease and the cure. But this strategy has a fatal flaw. It only works if you play defense. Machiavelli understood that the person who frames the story controls how everyone else interprets it. So instead of explaining why the rumors about you are false, you reframe the entire situation. Instead of defending your character, you calmly point out patterns of behavior that make people question the source. Instead of getting pulled into their emotional drama, you remain so composed that your very stillness makes their hysteria look suspicious. This is psychological warfare at its most sophisticated. You're not fighting their lies with your truth. You're making their lies irrelevant by changing the entire context of the conversation. When someone accuses you of being difficult to work with, you don't list your accomplishments. You express genuine concern for why they might be feeling so defensive about collaborative feedback. When they spread gossip about your personal life, you don't dignify it with denials. You wonder aloud whether people who focus so much on others' private affairs might be struggling with something in their own lives. The beauty of this approach is that it puts the manipulator in an impossible position. If they escalate their attacks, they prove your point about their instability. If they try to play victim, they look like they're confirming your concerns about their defensiveness. If they back down, they lose credibility with anyone who is watching the interaction. You've essentially created a psychological trap where every move they make validates your frame of the situation. But the true masterpiece of Machiavellian strategy is the divide-and-conquer principle. Most manipulators don't operate alone. They cultivate networks of enablers, allies, and fellow manipulators who provide them with emotional support, social proof, and protection from consequences. These alliances might look strong from the outside, but Machiavelli knew that they're built on the shakiest foundation possible: ego, jealousy, and mutual exploitation. The fatal weakness of any manipulator's network is that it's held together by self-interest, not loyalty. Each person in their circle is getting something from the relationship, whether it's social status, emotional validation, or protection from becoming the next target. But this means their commitment is conditional, and their trust is fragile. All you need to do is find the right pressure point, and the entire structure collapses. This doesn't mean you actively try to turn them against each other with obvious schemes or dramatic confrontations. That would be crude and detectable. Instead, you use subtle psychological principles that make them question each other naturally. You praise one member of their group slightly more than the others, not enough to be obvious, but enough to plant seeds of jealousy. You share information with one person that you know will make them wonder why they weren't included in certain conversations. You ask innocent questions that make them realize how little they actually know about each other's true motivations. The key is patience and subtlety. You're not trying to create immediate explosions. You're introducing tiny cracks in their foundation and letting natural human psychology do the rest. Manipulators are inherently suspicious people. They have to be in order to survive. So when you give them just enough reason to question whether their allies are truly loyal. Their paranoia does most of the work for you. What makes this particularly devastating is that you never have to lie or scheme. You simply highlight truths they were already trying to ignore. The person who always takes credit for group successes. The one who never shares information until they absolutely have to. The one who's just a little too interested in everyone else's business. These dynamics are always there, creating tension beneath the surface. You just help bring them into the light. And here's the most elegant part of this strategy. When their alliance inevitably crumbles, you're not seen as the one who destroyed it. You're seen as the person who remained calm and professional while others revealed their true colors. You become the stable alternative that people naturally gravitate toward when they're tired of the drama and manipulation. You win not by being the loudest or the most aggressive, but by being the most trustworthy. When everyone else's masks start slipping, the question isn't whether you have the right to defend yourself against manipulation. The question is whether you have the courage to fight back with the same level of sophistication and strategic thinking that's being used against you. Because in this game, good intentions are not enough. Moral superiority is not enough. You need to be smarter, more patient, and more calculating than the people who are trying to use you. Asterisk, the most sophisticated manipulators understand something that their victims never see coming. They don't need to attack you directly when they can make you attack yourself. They plant seeds of self-doubt, create situations where you question your own memory, and slowly erode your confidence until you're seeking their approval just to feel stable again. But Machiavelli knew that this psychological warfare has a critical vulnerability. It requires your participation. The moment you stop feeding their need for emotional reactions, their entire system collapses. This brings us to one of the most powerful weapons in the Machiavellian arsenal: weaponized silence. Most people think of silence as passive, as weakness, as backing down from a fight. But Machiavelli understood that silence is actually the most aggressive form of communication possible. It forces the other person to fill the void, to reveal their true intentions, to overplay their hand in ways that expose them completely. Picture this scenario. A manipulator makes a cutting remark designed to provoke you into defending yourself. Your natural instinct is to explain why they're wrong, to justify your position, to prove that you're not whatever they've accused you of being. But every word you speak gives them more ammunition to use against you. They can twist your explanation into evidence of guilt, your justification into proof of insecurity, your proof into confirmation of their original accusation. But what happens? When you simply smile and say nothing, when you let their words hang in the air, unanswered and uncomfortable, suddenly they're the one who looks aggressive. They're the one who seems to be attacking someone who isn't even fighting back. They're the one who has to either escalate to increasingly obvious manipulation or back down completely. And either choice makes them look worse while making you look more composed. But the genius of strategic silence is that it reverses the power dynamic completely. Instead of you scrambling to defend yourself, they're scrambling to get a reaction. Instead of you being on the defensive, they're desperately trying to regain control of a conversation that's slipping away from them. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects their desperation back at them, and everyone watching can see exactly what's happening. But silence alone isn't enough. You need to combine it with what Machiavelli called strategic unavailability. Manipulators need constant access to your emotional energy. They feed on your reactions, your attention, your concern about what they think of you. They want to know exactly where you are mentally and emotionally at all times, because that knowledge gives them power over you. So you must become unpredictable. This doesn't mean being rude or obviously distant. It means being selectively available. Sometimes you respond immediately to their messages. Sometimes you take days. Sometimes you're warm and engaging. Sometimes you're polite but reserved. Sometimes you're available for their drama. Sometimes you're mysteriously busy with more important things. You create a pattern of unpredictability that makes them constantly wonder what changed and whether they did something wrong. The psychological effect of this strategy is devastating. For someone who's used to controlling others, manipulators hate uncertainty because their entire system depends on being able to predict and influence your behavior. When you become a variable they can't solve, they start to panic. They begin overanalyzing every interaction, reading meaning into every pause, desperately trying to figure out what shifted in your relationship with them. And here's the beautiful part. They usually conclude that they're losing control over you, which makes them try harder, which makes them more obvious in their manipulation, which makes them less effective overall. Their increased desperation becomes visible to everyone around them, while your mysterious unavailability makes you seem more valuable and interesting. You flip the script completely, but perhaps the most sophisticated element of Machiavelli's strategy is what he called the long game. Most people want immediate satisfaction when they're dealing with manipulators. They want to expose them, confront them, defeat them in some dramatic showdown that proves once and for all who was right. But Machiavelli knew that the most devastating victories happen slowly, quietly, and completely. The key insight is that manipulators are ultimately self-destructive. Their tactics work in the short term, but they create long-term problems that eventually consume them. They burn bridges, exhaust their welcome, and gradually reveal their true nature to everyone around them. Your job isn't to accelerate this process. It's to position yourself perfectly for when their inevitable collapse happens. This means being patient while they hang themselves with their own rope. It means letting them win small battles while you prepare for the war. It means watching them get overconfident, overextended, and overexpo.